You know, it's only very recently that I've been able to get into the genre of roguelike games, such as Hades or Inscription or Binding of Isaac, with the former two being games that I recently picked up on my PC for the first time after Hades flew under my radar for the longest amount of time, and Inscription finally got ported over to Mac. So, yeah, it's safe to say that I'm pretty new to playing roguelike games, but I definitely find the concept interesting. Everything's randomized each time you start over, the games are hard at a baseline level, and when you die you have to start from square one. Though with roguelikes there's usually some form of underlying progression that means you don't always start over from the beginning, which I kind of like, especially with something like Hades. So today I'm going to be reviewing a roguelike which very recently came out on the PS4 and PS5, and that game is Arcadegeddon. This is one of the PlayStation Plus games for July of 2022, meaning that at the time of this recording you should be able to pick up the game for free. Oh, and for those who are interested in knowing, yes, it is also out on PC now. The game has you playing as a character that goes under the nickname of Plug, in a world where video games are incredibly popular and big corporations are starting to root out arcades and make them irrelevant. Your Uncle Gilly runs an arcade and has recently created his magnum opus video game, Arcadegeddon, which he intends to become really popular and show that the little guys, as in the arcades, can't be pushed around by big corporations. Except the titular Vision Fun Co. ends up, well, hacking the game and corrupting it from the inside out. So Gilly needs your help in order to stop that. In order to do this, you will be hopping into Arcadegeddon itself and you will be playing, well, a video game. Yeah, you're playing a game inside of a game. It's definitely interesting. The general concept of this game is that the game itself is a roguelike, so every time you hop into the game, you'll be faced with different levels and different enemies. The game will progressively get difficult and harder every time you go through a level, until the point where it becomes incredibly hard to keep up with what's going. You're pretty much the last defense for Gilly's arcade to keep it from going under, because Arcadegeddon is his last game, and if that game were to get destroyed, well, it would pretty much put Gilly out of business, which is bad. And he's your uncle, so yeah, you're gonna want to support him and help him so that way his game doesn't go completely underground, which is nice because this game is fun. In order to help defend Gilly's arcade, Gilly will ask you to enlist the help of the various gaming gangs that exist around the arcade, or as I would prefer to call them, gaming clans. These guys essentially serve as your quest givers. They'll give you objectives to complete in Arcadegeddon, and completing those objectives will allow you to get cosmetics, as well as being able to allow you to get their assistance, at least in regards to the story. I wouldn't say the story is all that important though when it comes to the game, however, because at a basic level, this is a roguelike game. However, if you want to level up your character and get the ability to unlock different types of gauntlet powers and different weapons for your loadout, you're going to want to complete stuff for these guys, because they will allow you to get XP faster, so that way you can upgrade your character and such. As for this game's presentation, it's a pretty rad looking presentation. The game has this neo-futuristic aesthetic that honestly reminds me a bit of No Straight Roads. Or at least the art style and character designs do that to me. I don't know, something about the abnormal skin colors of the characters, the general designs of them, it kind of reminds me of like futuristic aliens or something like that, or an alien race, which in general is pretty cool. There is voice acting in this game when it comes to the NPCs that you'll meet in the arcade, but their animations are more so they just pop into different poses while they're speaking. There's no sort of lip syncing or anything like that, but it is unique. The gameplay of Arcadegeddon has you playing a third-person shooter. Essentially, this game's combat centers around using all sorts of firearms, and because it's a roguelike, all the firearms are going to be randomly generated. So sometimes you'll find pistols, sometimes you'll find assault rifles, sometimes you'll find snipers, sometimes you'll find shotguns, sometimes you'll find grenade launchers, and there are several weapons in this game that are also just straight up wacky, which makes sense given the game's presentation. Like, one of the weapons I was able to find in this game, I initially thought was some sort of strange party minigun thing, but I found out in a later run, if you're playing with actual people, that it also serves as a support weapon, because if you shoot at your allies, it will provide them with shields. And you can actually give them over shields as well if you're using it when they have full shields. which it will burn away over time because it's overshield, but it's still an interesting detail that adds for some more strategy in the game. Weapons can also have different attributes, like you might get a weapon with electricity, which can jolt enemies and paralyze them, or you might get a weapon that can set enemies on fire, or a weapon that freezes them and slows them down. I don't know if there are any toxic weapons in the game yet. I think there are weapons that have splash damage like explosives, but again, I can't remember entirely to be sure. The game's objectives range from being able to destroy certain objects, to surviving a wave of enemies, to trying to hold a point until the point unlocks, to looking for key cards and using those to unlock locks that exist on the map. Once you complete this the first time, you'll have access to a safe area where you'll be able to buy equipment such as weapons, stat cards which give you passive buffs, which you can also find going around some levels, and also being able to replenish your ammo. One of the other things that you'll find in this area is an arcade cabinet, which if you use it while you're in PvP, you'll be able to play a quick round of PvP. And you can do this so that way you can have a bit of friendly competition with your friends in between trying to not die. And the winners will be able to get access to some special items, or just in general, they'll get access to more loot. You can also just straight up play the PvP mode itself separately from the main game, which is nice. It kind of plays like a Mario Party style thing, where everything's split into different mini games, and in general, you're trying to get as many points as possible in order to win. There are a total of 8 mini games in the PvP mode. It feels like they can go by somewhat fast, but they also feel just lengthy enough to be passable. I wouldn't say that I would sink a majority of my time into this though, because of the Mario Party style that the game seems to be going for, since it's kind of like a series of different like mini games and challenges that you need to complete, such as playing a game of essentially Splunky, or playing King of the Hill, where everyone is using this chainsaw blade looking weapon, or killing the most enemies and players at the same amount of time in order to score points. Going back to the main gameplay itself, however, while you're in the safe area, another thing that you'll end up finding is you will find this difficulty machine. While I don't have footage of it in this specific clip that's playing at the moment, you'll see that in the top right there's this little counter here which shows difficulty right under the amount of time that the run's been going for and the stage that you are on. This difficulty modifier will increase every time you complete a stage, but while you're in the safe zone, you can actually use some of your currency in order to increase the difficulty. Increasing the difficulty obviously makes the game harder because you'll gain more difficult enemies, they will do more damage, and in general they will be a bit more spongy, but you'll also tend to get better rewards if you manage to complete the stage, as well as getting more points. And you want to make sure you're collecting points because that gets you the in-game currency outside of the runs, which allows you to buy cosmetics and things of that nature, as well as alternate colors for the cosmetic items that you get, and weapon skins, stuff like that. Because this game has a microtransaction system, of course it's going to have cosmetics that you can buy, that sort of thing. Raising the difficulty is completely your choice, because you can choose to pay the currency there in order to make things harder, or you can not and just go through it progressively. The starting screen before you start around the game seems to have different sort of levels that you can start from, or starting from the different stages. The farthest stage that I've been able to reach in this game so far is stage 6. And the reason for that was because the party I was playing with at the time bumped up the difficulty incredibly high. So by the time we got to stage 5, the difficulty was at 10. And that also culminated in me having to fight a boss by myself after both teammates died. And that boss took, I kid you not, about 10 to 15 minutes. Both of my teammates left at that point, but I did actually manage to beat the boss, despite basically running out of ammo for my stronger weapons, to the point where I had to use the basic pistol to try to kill it, which took some doing, but I was able to manage. And then, of course, because the game was at difficulty 11 at the time and I was on my own, I proceeded to die in the next stage. This game has, as I just mentioned, boss fights. There's this meter next to your stage counter and difficulty counter and time counter and your points. This little hexagonal thing. As you go throughout the game, complete objectives and go through stages, you will fill out the boss bar, and when that's full, you'll be able to compete against a boss or fight a boss. If you manage to kill the boss, you will be able to get a chest with some pretty strong loot in it. Although these bosses can be rather hard. And yeah, I guess I forgot to talk about the loot system. While you're going through the game, you'll be able to find these chests all over the place. The chests are colored differently depending on the rarity of the loot that you can find in there, with blue being rare, purple being epic, and gold being legendary. You don't see any uncommon or common chests, but do note that common and uncommon items are in here. It basically uses the same rarity system that exists in Fortnite, with the 5 different classes and all of them being color-coded, that sort of thing. Though, you should keep in mind that just because a weapon is at common, it doesn't mean that it's unusable, because all the weapons are varied and they're all fun to use. The gameplay of this game in general is just very satisfying. I like the sound design of the various weapons. You can hold 3 different weapons at a time. It's not necessarily hard to switch the weapons. It's just triangle cycles to the next weapon that you have. You don't have to hold it to switch a weapon. You just need to make sure that you're tapping it. And there's a variety of different things that you can get, from shotguns to grenade launchers to sniper rifles to assault rifles, plasma rifles, laser blasters, hand cannons, all that jazz. In general, the game's variety when it comes to the weapons is pretty good. Would you come across these weapons somewhat frequently? That depends on how frequently you're able to find chests. I think sometimes they can drop from enemies, but I'm pretty sure that's more rare than the rest of the time when it comes to the game. And of course, you also find the skill cards with passive buffs when you're opening the chest, all that sort of stuff. There's also the various coins which drop from enemies and chests, which allow you to build up the power of your gauntlet with your various abilities, all that. I initially thought that picking up the blue coins also refilled your shields, but coming to think of it, it's just that your shields regenerate over time if you're not taking damage, which makes sense, unless you're using something like the Party Popper weapon, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a support weapon as well, which allows you to heal people's shields over time. Now, in saying that and liking the game and its presentation and the music being absolutely entertaining to listen to, this game's gameplay is fun and I like it, but I have a couple issues with the game. The first one is kind of an important bug, and this actually happened during the first multiplayer session I played of the game. Sometimes you will go into boss chambers and you'll just straight up not find the bosses, or rather the boss won't spawn. The game usually plays this cutscene to introduce the boss that you're about to go up against, but sometimes it just straight up won't do it and the boss you're supposed to fight won't spawn. Because of this, you will essentially be soft locked and you'll have to kill yourself in order to start the run over again. The other major issue that I have with this game might be because I'm playing on a PS4 instead of a PS5, but it still goes with saying. The game's frame rate is absolutely atrocious. It literally dips towards 20 frames or so when things get incredibly busy. I don't know if it's 20 frames because I don't have a frame counter, but it has to be around that point with how slowed down the game becomes. Like, literally, this is an absolute hindrance whenever it happens, and in general, it's pretty annoying. Especially when it takes away from the game's environments, which are very well made. And in general, the game has a nice presentation. It's just annoying that that presentation occasionally gets ruined by the frames dipping and making it pretty hard to keep track of what's going on. And again, this is a roguelike where if you die, you have to start from the beginning, so keeping track of what's going on is pretty important. So something like this shouldn't be happening this frequently. I mean, look at this. I'm playing on a solo round of the game right now, and I'm still getting lag spikes. If it was for something like multiplayer, it would still be inexcusable because this game was developed with multiplayer in mind. But single player, that shouldn't be happening at all. Now, I will cut the game some slack since it seems like it came out on consoles very recently. But it's been in early access for about a year. I feel like they would have resolved these issues on PC already, and maybe it's just because the game had some trouble while it was porting, but I'm not entirely sure, especially when this game was announced on PS5. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with the frame rate issues, but it's a real annoyance. Aside from that, there are also some minor bugs or things that might be because of the design of the game, I don't know. If we're talking about things like bugs, then, well, sometimes the camera will clip through the wall when you're pressed against it or something like that. Which, I feel like for something like this, when you need to keep track of where enemies are and see what you're doing, that can be a real hindrance. I wouldn't say that the camera clipping into the wall has happened frequently for me, but it's happened a couple of times. It's definitely been something that's noticeable. There's also the matter of sliding in this game. If you're sprinting, when you press the R3 button, instead of doing the dodge roll that you'll be doing when you're moving at normal speed, you will slide. You can actually use sliding to a good effect since it damages enemies if you slide into them, I think. And you can also slide into boxes to instantly destroy them. The issue is that the slides sometimes glitch and don't cancel themselves out, which leads to a couple of seconds of you trying to get out of the slide animation so you can get back to moving normally or trying to dodge out of the way. In general, this might be a bit of an animation bug or something because of the design of the game, but it's still an annoyance. On top of that, the way the slide works in this game as well doesn't really function like most other games would have a slide mechanic. In other games, if you slide, your character will always be moving in the direction you start the slide in. Even if you look around to look towards other enemies, sliding basically just means that you'll slide past them and you can just look to shoot in the direction that they are while still moving in another direction. However, in this game, if you turn while you're sliding, your character is going to turn while they're sliding towards the enemy that you're shooting, which can become really disorienting in the beginning. I wouldn't say that it's absolutely impossible to get used to, but part of me just prefers that sliding would keep you moving in a direction instead of changing when you're trying to look around, because I've had several moments where I've tried to slide away from an enemy, then turn away while still expecting to move in the direction I was initially going, so I can essentially shoot at them while moving farther away from them. But that was not the case in this game. With that aside, however, I still think the game is definitely fun. It has interesting gunplay, the environments are very nice, the music is awesome, and for a multiplayer roguelike, this is a pretty fun multiplayer roguelike. I think I've only seen one other instance of a multiplayer roguelike shooter, and I can't remember the exact name of the game, but I wouldn't say that I've seen this type of concept that often. So with that aside, it's pretty interesting. Plus, the game also has an interesting way of progression as well, because if you get good at using certain weapons, you'll be able to go into your customization back in the main lobby, and you'll be able to pick which weapons that you start a run out with. So you won't always be starting off with just the basic pistol and the bat. You might be able to start off with other weapons that you can actually find in the game. Before I give my final verdict on the game, I should probably state this. I got this game on PlayStation Plus, meaning that if you're playing on PS4 or PS5, the game will be free. Is it worth to play on PS4? Well, even with the frame rate dips, I see it being worth it. However, the game is also on Xbox and on PC. I could see it running on a good PC if you have one that has the right specs, but I don't know if the frame rate issues are exclusive to PS4. However, if they carry over to something like Xbox, then that could be an issue, because according to Xbox, the price point of this game is $40, which for something like this, I don't see the $40 price tag being exactly justified. Don't get me wrong, this game is a lot of fun and it's pretty good. I definitely see it being worth $40 for some people, but in my humble opinion, I think it makes more sense for this game to be worth $25 or possibly $30. Again, just want to clarify, this game isn't bad, it's a lot of fun, it's definitely enjoyable to play, I just don't see it being worth $40, at least not while the game is this buggy. That being said, if you are hardcore into roguelikes and you have a PlayStation console, I would suggest picking this game up, even though it does seem that if you're playing on PS4, the game seems to have lag spikes, because, well, currently during July you can get the game for free, which for a game like this, I'd say that's about worth it, even with the bugs. Though those bugs are kind of the reason I would say it's not exactly worth it to get it on Xbox or PC at the moment. Well, maybe PC if your PC runs it well enough. But I'm not exactly sure how viable I see this game being to play if it's at $40. Again, as I mentioned previously, I feel like the price point would be a lot fairer if you were getting it at $30 or $25. So in that respect, if you're getting it on PS Plus, I would suggest get it while you still can. But if you're getting it on another console, I would just say wait for the game to go on sale to about 25 or 30. Because that definitely feels more reasonable given the game's status as being somewhat laggy with its frame rate and having the entire glitch of not being able to fight the bosses sometimes. If I had to score this game, I'd have to pull an IGN here and say that the game makes you feel like a youngster going into an arcade and fighting against viruses to fight the power or whatever the hell you want to call it. So, yeah, I think that's about a 7 out of 10. If you like roguelike games, you'll enjoy this, though I highly suggest playing on PC or PS5 so you don't have such atrocious frame rates.